Notes and reminders on absolute value and additive inverse. This should be a fairly short podcast, but I realize that people often need a refresher on these two concepts. So let's begin with a definition. Define absolute value of A. So when you see those bars, that reads as the absolute value of A, or the absolute value of a number. Well, we're going to define that as the positive distance from 0. So absolute value of A is the positive distance from 0 on the number line. For now, we're looking on the real number line. Someday we'll look at the imaginary numbers. Positive distance from 0 on the real number line. Okay, well, let's just take a little look. Well, here's 0, -1, -2, -3. Well, clearly -3 is 3 units away from 0. If you think about length, you typically don't say, oh, it's -3 centimeters away. You say it's 3 centimeters away. So 1, 2, 3. And notice that 3 is also 3 units away from 0. So what that means is, and you can probably guess, the absolute value of -3, well, that's the positive distance from 0, so the absolute value of -3 is 3. But the absolute value of 3 is also 3, positive. So a lot of people say, oh, so the bars make it positive. Yes, that's kind of an oversimplification, but yes, so it doesn't turn it opposite. It makes it positive. It's the positive. So let's just make sure we get it. So absolute value of -1,000 is 1,000. Okay? But absolute value of 12.5 is 12.5. So just make sure it's positive. That's the main thing. Okay. Now a couple reminders on additive inverse, because these two symbols often get, bars and parentheses are two different things, right? So I wanted to remind you that we will denote, okay, little definition here. Define the additive inverse. Okay, so the additive inverse is simply the opposite of a number. So you can just think of it as the opposite of a number. So symbolically, we're going to denote negative A. So we can write it with parentheses like that, the negation of A or the opposite of A, or we could just say negative A like that. That just means the opposite of A. So negative A, the opposite of A, is the additive inverse of A. So example, you say, what is the additive inverse of 7? So additive inverse of 7 is, question, and you're probably thinking, okay, -7. All right, now we're going to get a little more complicated than that. So I like to play this game of fill in the blank. Okay, so fill in the blank with the following symbol: less than, greater than, or equal to. Okay, here's my first example. Negation of the negation of A, of, 9, negation of the negation of 9, blank, absolute value of -9.2. Okay, now remember that absolute value and bars are two totally different things, so let's think this through. The negation of the negation of 9, that basically means the opposite of 9, of -9. So I like to think of this as, think of it like this in English. If I'm not going to the party, sometimes I call it the not rule. If I'm not going to the party, I'm going to the party. So the negation of the negation of 9 is 9. Okay? If you do it in pieces, just cover up this first negative and just think about -9. Okay? And then translate this to mean the opposite. Okay, so then what's the opposite of -9? 9. So the main thing is you're going to end up back at 9 with this one. Now over here, these are bars though. Notice these are bars, absolute value. So what's the absolute value of -9.2? Well, hey, that's 9.2. So now we're ready to fill in the blank. 9 blank 9.2. Well, 9 is less than 9.2, so hopefully you're remembering that that is your less than symbol. A lot of people say it kind of looks like a squished L, L for less than. So, okay, so 9 is less than 9.2. All right, now let's try another one. Okay, so I always like to read things. So this would read as the negation of the negation of the negation of 2. So another way of saying that is, here you're at -2. Just think about this as the opposite. Okay, so then the opposite of -2 would send you back to 2, +2. But then you've got another one. So the opposite of 2 is -2. So some people say, oh, you've got 3 negative signs. That's an odd number of signs. You know, you're going to end up back at -2. All right. So you have to think that through. Now over here, though, these are bars, right? So we always have to remind ourselves, okay, these are bars. That's absolute value. So absolute value of -3 is definitely 3. But you've got this negative sign floating out front, so now you're back to -3. All right? So we think it through. So -2 blank -3. -2 is bigger than, greater than -3. So, because think about if you're $2 in debt, that's better than being $3 in debt, right? So even though they're both bad, you know, it's more money in the account, even if you're if you have $2 in debt versus $3 in debt. So, okay, hope that helps. And just for grins and giggles, let's try one with fractions, because I know how everybody loves fractions. Okay, bar -2/3, so that's the absolute value of -2/3, blank, bar -4/3. It means absolute value of -4/3. Okay, so the first thing you're probably thinking is, okay, the absolute value of -2/3 is 2/3. All right, so now we've got 2/3 versus, over here, the absolute value of -4, that should say thirds. Okay, the absolute value of -4/3 is 4/3. So now we just have to think 2/3 versus 4/3. Well, if you're a decimal person, 2/3 is 0.666 repeater, and 4/3 is 1 1/3, which is 1.3 repeater. Some people need to think about decimals, but 2/3 is definitely less than 4/3, so we need the less than symbol. Note to self, less than. All right, good practice. Hope that helps.